Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Good afternoon to everyone. Nice to be back. Welcome to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. Had another heck of a week, lots to get through, so I'm not going to spend too much time. So let's bring in the crew. We've got there, of course, up in Clickmanager, our favourite lawyer, Eva. Eva, how are you doing?
Hi, Roddy. I nearly cost myself £1 there for the first time. I had a busy week, the same as everybody else, but now that Storm Bert has arrived, the soup pot's on with a big pot of leek and potato soup that'll be ready when we finish this.
Oh, lovely jubbly. Lovely jubbly. And over there, who should have told us or warned us and given us an update, maybe he can, it's the weatherman himself, Mr. Quinnen. What do you think of Storm Bert, Mr. Quinnen?
Oh, I think it's the best choice of name for a storm we've had in a long time. I'm looking forward to Storm Fred next week.
Yeah. Talking of storms, let's bring in Storm Boswell. Mr. Boswell, where are you today?
Howdy.
Where are you?
Brussels, still in Brussels. About to head stateside, about to head over to the States. But I'm here and I've got a mate over from London and we're going to go to Waterloo. Got a wee drive down there and see what Wellington got up to. And a wee scoot about there, see what's happening.
I take it there will be alcohol involved.
No, that was last night and after. We'll get back on the beers, no doubt. Belgian beer's very, very fine. Food's excellent. It's a wonderful, wonderful country. Real mix, real European. Obviously the heart of Europe, but very cosmopolitan. Absolutely wonderful. I think a third of people that live in Brussels are local. The other 2/3 come from all over the world, mostly Europe. It's a fabulous place.
Yeah, I'll be mentioning later because they were the first country to say that they would enact the ICC warrants, but we'll talk about that later. And I'm also delighted, a long time since we've had on our next guest, and it's down there in Ayrshire. It's Denise Sommerville. Denise, my friend, how are you? Long time no see.
Hi, Roddy. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I've been pretty busy, but quiet behind the scenes down here in Ayrshire. Doing a lot of local activism for the community. So busy with uni as well. So thanks very much for having me on.
Oh, thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure to see you. If I get started right away, just something I didn't have it down to, but I had to mention there was some by-elections in Scotland, which in Glasgow area, which Labour won all 3 of them. But what was for me, not concerning that the British Labour Party won them either, but the turnouts once again are showing that the apathy party is winning. I mean, I think the biggest turnout was about 19-20%, but in the Glasgow Northwest, I believe, they only had 12.9%. So, 88% staying at home, or 81.1% if we want to be pedantic, staying at home. It's a really worrying trend for democracy, is it not, Eva?
I'm just reading this because the constituency in question, where the turnout was 12.4%, is called North East Glasgow. It was again by Labour from the SNP in the general election, and Labour obviously won it the other night. But when you look at the makeup of the constituency, I think it's pretty clear that people in the main are utterly and completely disillusioned with pretty well all politicians. And they're certainly, I think, cheesed off with Labour if you look at national opinion polls, but they're seriously disgruntled with the SNP when you see how their vote has just failed to materialise. But to get to the extent where, in essence, 88 people out of 100 are not voting, then it says all you need to know about just the horrific state of party politics in Scotland today. I think 12% was the lowest. The highest was it in the low 30s somewhere in Edinburgh, and it was 27% or so up in Fort William. But the Fort William one was interesting because of the massive difference in the vote now between first and second place. First place was Liberal Democrat, second place was SNP, and the gap between them is more than 30%. So I think that people are actually in their droves staying away from polling stations to send a message to politicians, but those who are actually going out to vote are sending a message loudly and clearly to the SNP that they've had enough. Is it 16 by-elections that the SNP have failed to win? Now, some of them they were never going to win, but by the law of averages, they should have won something somewhere by now. But 16 losses out of 16, that's some record.
No half. And there's a reason for it, and they could change it overnight, because the other polls and polling shows that independence is still the preferred option for Scots. So it's up to you, Mr. Swinney. We'll be talking about you later as well, Mr. Swinney. But on this as well, Lloyd, but another thing, we were talking just last week or the week before, I think it was last week, where the Liberal Democrats won a seat in Edinburgh. And because the Liberal candidate campaigned on being a local candidate, and the day after the election, put her house up for sale and said she was skedaddling out of Edinburgh. Is it any wonder that the turnouts are 12%, 19%, 20% when the parties and the candidates treat the public with such contempt?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Roddy. But I think the lesson from Thursday night's by-elections is this. The Collington by-election and the scandal of the Lib Dem who's going to move to another country is the fact that they got close to 35% of a turnout. That's a very, very middle-class area where the Conservatives, Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party are organised, so they get people out. In Glasgow, those are primarily working-class constituencies. You know, the one with the 12% turnout is Milton and the top of Springburn. Now, these are some of the areas of the lowest deprivation or the highest levels of deprivation in Glasgow. Now, I'd like to look at it from a slightly different point of view. From an organisational point of view, when you get a turnout as low as this and the numbers of people voting are in the hundreds or in the tens rather than in the thousands, which these multi-member wards should be, then it tells you that the SNP that lost all of these seats has no organisation on the ground anymore. Because if you actually look at the numbers, and I know the numbers for membership of the SNP in Maryhill and Springburn, if you look at the numbers for the turnout in that election, not even their own membership came out to vote. Now, if you can't get your members to go out to vote, you can't get your local members to go out and knock on doors, talk to people and spread the good message, then you are on a trajectory that only ends in one place, and that's the bin. Now, I don't know if the changes within the SNP will make it possible for them to look at it, to look at these results with a cold look required, because it's not just about the bigger message. It's about the fact that for the first time in a very long time, the boots on the ground are from the Labour Party, not the Scottish National Party. And it would appear to me that this trajectory tells us that those boots on the ground are not coming back for the SNP.
No, it's a worry for not just for the SNP, Phil, but it's a worry for democracy. But it's because it's not just this has been replicated throughout the UK. There was some by-elections down in England as well, which Reform Party won a few of them. But the fact is that the numbers are down. We're not getting much more than 20% in most seats. It is a worry for democracy.
It is, but it's either apathy or deliberately staying away, which I believe is in this case. For the vast majority of people, the people who occasionally vote or vote when it matters, general elections, they usually turn out for, but the local elections are usually very poorly represented. There's always an expectation that you will get a drop, but here, these figures are so low, and as Eva and Lloyd have already pointed out, the SNP lost these seats. Their members and traditional voters deliberately stayed away. And having lost all these seats, it is a clear indication, as if we needed any more, that the SNP are on their knees in Scotland at the moment. And in these areas, as Lloyd says, they can't even turn out and vote for their own party that they're members of. So no wonder we see the elected members, these vultures are circling for seats. There will be very, very few seats left for the SNP after the next election, the local election, Scottish election. And these gravy train seats are in high demand. A lot of them have got very used to it. A lot of these people, bear in mind, don't have any previous jobs that get paid anywhere near the money they're getting in this kind of on this gravy train, and this is why it feeds the it feeds the ego. You're getting a chance to have a ministerial car, you lord it out and you swan about in a car because you think you're the big I am, when you're just a fancy councillor, is the sad reality here. And the thing that sickens is most is they're not getting the message. They don't care. We're wasting our time trying to persuade them. We need rid. And sadly, you know, for someone like the rest of us, we worked very hard to build the SNP to where it got to up to 24 on the way up to 2014 in that referendum. We now need complete decimation to rebuild again. Because we cannot get rid of these troffers from the leadership of the SNP without the pain of physically removing them and force them to go and get a real job somewhere else. That's the only thing we can do, and it's come to that, because I don't see enough people standing up and doing something about it, forcing these shysters to live up to what we wanted them to do, or to admit that they have failed, because they won't. They just blame somebody else all the time and constantly pretend that they've got a cunning plan, or they're for independence, or they actually care about the people. They don't. They're selfish, and they will get what they deserve in this next Scottish election.
I'm coming to that very point in a minute, Mr. Boswell. Denise, the apathy party seems to be winning hands down. The electorate just are not enthused by any of the parties, are they?
Sorry, can you repeat that again, Roddy?
I said the public are not enthused by any of the political parties, are they?
No, I think everybody's a bit disengaged with political parties at the moment. They don't see anyone that represents any member of society anymore. It seems to be us, the people, and them, the politicians, the elites, whatever you like to call them. And it's so wide a gap that I think people are just fed up with turning out to vote for people that make false promises these days.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely bang on the money. And there's the thing, now during the week we got a wee bit of excitement, Eva, because we heard Kate Forbes had suggested, and I quickly read the article as did you, and she said there is a credible route, credible path to independence. I thought, oh, fabulous, here we go. Now I read the article a couple of times, Eva, got in touch with you and said, have I missed something? Because she told us there was a credible path, and then didn't tell us what the credible path was.
I was rubbing my hands in glee. I thought, here you go, you wee beauty. The penny's finally dropped. This is it. They've been listening. They've been watching Prism, and they're actually going to do something about it. And I read behind the paywall. And what did she say the path to independence is? She's never said it yet. All she said is there is a path to independence.
There you go.
Talk about bursting your bubble. I'm absolutely incredulous that what then followed was she was the recipient of, I think, a business award at Politician of the Year awards later in the week. How I wish a journalist had said to her, hold the bus, tell us your path, set it out, spell it out, what is it? Because this is all we're getting now from the SNP, is the continued dangled carrot that only with independence can we do things like have a winter fuel payment for all our pensioners. I mean, this week, Stephen Flynn and I see this morning Ronnie Cowan have both been tweeting about, now that Storm Bert's here, remember the 37 Labour MPs voted to take away the winter fuel payment from thousands of Scottish pensioners. Well, yeah, they did, but the other cause and effect scenario that has to come into play here is if Scotland was independent, those Labour MPs in Westminster would have nothing at all to do with Scotland because we'd be paying our own winter fuel payment. So it is not just the Labour Party that are at fault here. It is absolutely the SNP who were elected to achieve independence and have sat upon their hands. Every last one of them in the leadership is responsible for every death from hypothermia that there is in Scotland this coming winter because of their failure to implement sensible, competent policies and particularly take our country to the freedom that we so desperately need.
Yeah. Lloyd, did you get a wee bit excited when you saw that headline? There is a credible path to independence, followed by, I mean, it's like me saying there is a credible path for Partick Thistle to win the Champions League. Good night.
This isn't a laughing matter, and I'm laughing. As soon as I saw the headline, I knew that the article would be empty, because Kate Forbes is another example of what I've seen over the past 2.5 decades of the Scottish Parliament. People with no backstory, people with no known activism within their political organisation are suddenly thrust forward as being the future. Wendy Alexander came from nowhere, ended up nearly leading the Labour Party to its first disaster. Kate Forbes is another one of these people. Kezia Dugdale was one as well. You know, these people are the answer to all our problems. But when you look into their backstory, they have no real backstory at all. Now, Kate Forbes does have a backstory. Kate Forbes has been promoted in this country on the back of nothing discernible that I can find. You know, where is the policy paper? Where is the policy? Where are the statements of the path to independence, for instance? There's nothing. There is nothing there whatsoever, except she is the flag carrier in the cabinet of the Scottish government for the British-American partnership. Now, explain to me the credible path to independence when the organisation that you are happy to be a part of and be patronised by is run by the British and the Americans. Both publicly have stated their opposition to independence. Is there some possible way that Kate Forbes could square that circle for me and the rest of the people of this country? It's astonishing how we allow ourselves to be told by a media that we in the national movement know tells us lies all the time, but we buy the lies. The lie is Kate Forbes is a powerful, useful, and incredible politician. Where is the evidence? Ask yourselves, people. Stephen Flynn, where is the evidence? Where is the evidence of these people's efficacy as politicians? There is none. And it's time that we applied our criticism of the media and our desire not to listen to their lies, that we apply that right across the board. Just because it makes you feel a little bit nice about them saying something nice about a member of the SNP. If they're saying something nice about a member of the SNP, it's because that member of the SNP isn't doing what you want them to do, which is namely outline the credible path to independence.
Correct. Phil, it's almost the old carrot, you know, independence, vote for us, give us another mandate. This vote, you know, we're okay, we've got a credible path, we're just not telling you what it is.
Yeah, the secret plan, there's a credible path to independence. What is it? Lloyd's absolutely right. I've said we should check for actions, not words. She doesn't even have the words. You know, normally they say they're going to do something and they let you down. She's insipid. She's playing it safe. She's described as conservative, always has been a conservative, and will continue to be conservative, who, since she's gotten into a position of power, has failed to show any initiative that will gain us our independence. She is an accountant who worked for Barclays. She was evangelical and came up through the SNP youth. I'm okay with that story if it's somewhat suspicious, but Lloyd's right, she came from nowhere. And the problem is that we've heard this same story before, a cunning plan. Really, since Nicola came in, we've heard this, and it's turned out to be lies every single time. It doesn't exist. And that thing that Lloyd pointed out again, she's in with the British-American partnership. The Americans and the Brits, and I put the Americans first because we know who's leading who and who's telling who what to do what, are anti-Scottish independence, as Angus Robertson and most of the current devolutionist leadership of the SNP are. And that's a problem for the people of Scotland, as those now tumbling into poverty, 1 in 5, are all too readily aware of, and they're too busy fighting the poverty they face to even talk about this. So that's why we have to be the voice of those who are disenfranchised and in real pain at the minute and suffering. Now these people, and Kate is one of them, they're not standing up for us against the man, against the establishment. They should rage against the machine for us, but won't, as there's a price for standing up against the man, and these people put their careers first, and they will not jeopardise their careers, and they put the careers in front of the people all the way. They're not freedom fighters, they're in it primarily for themselves. That's why Kate is not a change. If she and when she becomes a leader, it's just shots each. It's just taking a turn each at the trough. And it's all we've seen since Nicola has been in power, and all we will see until we clean out these con artists currently sitting in senior positions or supporting them in paid roles. The vultures continue to circle the fight for the ever-diminishing seats on the gravy train, and she's just another shyster, full of promises and they're lies. There is no cunning plan.
No, exactly. There's not. Denise, no credible plan, but they're telling us there's a credible path. They're just insulting us and gaslighting us.
Definitely. Smoke screens. It's the same story. It's been reiterated just before me. And no plan to go forward or put that plan into action. We all know there's a globalist agenda going on, and they're playing right into their hands. It just kind of looks like they're bought and sold basically for puppets. They're not going to do anything. They'll feed the public what they want to be, or what they think they want to be heard, keep the message going, keep a spite amongst themselves about the question, and they can just push along with their plans behind the scenes. And I believe all this has got to do with it as well. So it's quite disheartening. We need Scottish independence to go our own path and not get involved in these global conflicts that's going on at the moment.
We're going to come on to them for sure.
We are, very nicely.
Eva, we've talked about low turnouts and what's going wrong. Kate got an award from the Herald, British supporting Herald, for Business of the Year, probably for writing up and promoting the free ports, which will help the Brits and destroy Scotland. Maybe that's what she got it for. But there were some belters, and I remember when the Herald before one year, when Alex Salmond was at his zenith, where he was just the supreme. They gave the Herald gave the Debater of the Year to Joanna. God, I've forgotten her name now. We're not genetically.
Joanne Lamont.
John Lamont. She got Debater of the Year, which was, just ridiculous. But even better now, the party that has removed our winter fuel payment, the party that's given since July 12.8 billion to Ukraine, the party that has stuck up national insurance, the party that has now become the quickest, most unpopular party in record, this man, watch my lips, there will be no austerity under Labour, who's been hiding from facing that truth, he was voted Politician of the Year. Oh, but it gets better. I'm not finished, Eva. Then they gave this award to the Green Champion, the woman who cost the Scottish Government £200 million with her failed bottle return scheme. She got the Green Champion of the Year. Am I missing something?
Oh, gone are the days of capable politicians who were able to stand on their own 2 feet and belt out a speech or properly engage in a debate where, they could duck and dive and they could ad-lib and they had one-liners and they always had an answer for some, whatever might have been thrown at them. Instead, what we've got, because we talk about this every week and we see it day in and day out, is that we've got second or third rate people elected to that Holyrood chamber who often are actually unable to read pre-prepared speeches without stumbling and stammering over words that are longer than 2 or 3 syllables. We see it weekly and it is utterly pathetic and demeaning. It is also unnecessary because, again, as we've said before, it's a product of the party system and it's a product of nepotism, jobs for the boys, sooking in, people being rewarded for favours as opposed to being rewarded as the result of ability, experience, knowledge, vision and hope for our country. So, no, I'm not the slightest bit surprised to see the calibre of most of those who received the awards. There was a particularly good one, though, which was for Campaigners of the Year, I think, for the Allen family in relation to their daughter and death in custody. And that one was certainly most worthwhile and very highly deserved, very richly deserved. But there's an absolute corker of a letter in the press today about Lorna Slater, written by Blair Bowman, representative of particularly, I think, the whisky industry, and he refers very succinctly to Lorna Slater's failures, and he points out that the court action that's now underway as the result of Lorna Slater's management of the deposit return scheme, it's a £200 million lawsuit from BIFA, who say that Lorna Slater's mishandling of waste contracts caused them significant financial damage. This court action or impending court action or looming court proceedings is something that should, in my view, disqualify every politician from either receiving an award when those matters are outstanding or indeed proceeding towards being vetted as a candidate, as we've touched on before too. It is disgusting, embarrassing, and it really doesn't help Scotland's cause one iota.
No, I'm thinking about starting Prism Awards, and the first award goes to Roddy McLeod for being the best interviewer in the internet. I mean, it would be just as well. Thank you. But it is these things. We're talking about why is there low turnouts? Well, you know, we've got the mainstream media, Lloyd, trying to tell us that these are the best politician in Scotland is Anna Savard. God give me strength. That the big green man. I mean, I would give it every year to Andy Whiteman probably, but they give it to Lorna Slater's cost us £200 million. And we wonder why we're getting low turnouts and why the people are disengaging. But I've got one more for you, because this is an absolute corker. Because the SNP, not content with, I've got to see if I can find this right here. I've got it here somewhere. Excuse me, I'm being very inefficient. I should leave this to Keki. I don't know why I do it. But where are we? There we go. This man, a serial loser. Mario Baggio, I mean, he's never won anything. He keeps popping up, keeps getting beaten, and keeps getting jobs within the SNP. Is it any wonder the SNP have lost their way when a serial loser, a man who does, I mean, he's lost more times than Murdo Fraser, for God's sake. Is it any wonder that the SNP are slipping and that people have got no regard for the politicians these days?
No, it's no surprise whatsoever, but I mean, it shows you the ever-tightening circle of those that John Swinney feels he can trust, with bringing Stephen Noon on board, and now Marco Biaggi, a sitting councillor in Edinburgh, let me remind everybody, a sitting councillor who, to take up the job with Swinney, has resigned his council seat. So we'll have no stories from the SNP about Liberal Democrats getting elected and then legging it into the night, when in actual fact Marco Biaggi is doing exactly the same thing. But he's been part of this slightly below the radar and troffers. You know, when he's not a councillor, he's working for Tommy Shepherd. When he's not working for Tommy Shepherd, he's working in headquarters in the Independence Unit. Remember that? Remember the Independence Unit at headquarters that Marco was in charge of. The fact of the matter is, he is straight out of the same pea pod as Stephen Noon. He's a devolutionist. He's an Atlanticist. He would pretend that he's of the left. He would pretend that he's moderately green, when in reality, this is the laddie. And let's not forget here, he's bright, but he has deep flaws, like many of them. And when he was promoted to, if you remember correctly, he was the Minister for Local Government under Nicola's first government in her cabinet, and then had to resign after 8 months because he had a psychological breakdown of some kind and didn't attend Parliament for many, many months, and then finally was stood down. This is not the calibre of people we require at this stage, either for our government or for a floundering SNP. What they should be seeking out is people who have solutions, not people who will cover up past mistakes, which is what all of these appointments are about. They're all about keeping control of the past narrative at the expense of the future narrative and the expense of the lives of the people of this country. The appointment of Marco Biaggi is yet another straightforward insult to the people of this country. But it would appear that Mr. Swinney, in his nerdiness, is utterly determined that every single section of the Scottish population will be insulted by the Scottish National Party before the election in 2026.
Yeah, it's quite incredible, Phil. I mean, Marco Biaggi, he gets parachuted in everywhere. He gets these jobs, he gets everything, and really, what has he achieved for our cause?
Well, nothing really. Again, self-serving. So this is jobs for the in-crowd, those who have supported the current snidey leadership and are being kept sweet. Mostly, as Lloyd has already mentioned, because they know the truth about what these shysters in the SNP leadership have been up to. We're usually complicit in it and have to be kept sweet, or more carts will crawl out of more bags. And there's a lot of skeletons in a lot of cupboards here. That's just how the world is, and it's why you keep them on the hook. It's how the MI5, 77th Brigade, get their claws in you, get the hook in you, and they drag you along by the ear and tell you what to do. And this is that's happening. This is going back to these politician or comedy awards you were talking about, and it would be funny. It would be funny, but the joke is on us. The people of Scotland pay the price, and it's not for the betterment of our people or our country. Anis Sarwar is no man of the people. He just happened to be the mouthpiece at the time the establishment had to swap the Tories out, so he's in. Also, what is this prize for? Lying? And con men and tricksters? Is that what's now rewarded? Well, it seems to be, because the politicians of today are professional liars, including Kate Forbes. She supports free ports and gets her prize, but her prize is that she will be allowed by the establishment to be a leader for the SNP. Because this prize here at the Herald is just another profile boost for her, as she is not a threat to the Union. This is to the major detriment of the people of Scotland, and this is the favour that she is rewarded from the establishment, an establishment she works for. Anis Sarwar, we've already pointed out, read my lips, your pants are on fire, Anis. 1 in 5 in poverty, you're a disgrace. Lorna Slater is a first-rate clown, a shambles of a politician, cost us a fortune with her fantasy idiot policies, not least of which is the failed bottle return scheme. All the way up to the general election. We've played it enough times here, this watch my lips, there will be no austerity. That's the big one. That for me is the biggest of them all. That liar rewarded, and the 1 in 5 in poverty. We all pay the price, but especially currently the 20% of people in Scotland who are now living in poverty. That's the disgrace here.
Yeah, all these awards, Denise, for losers, failures and liars, and a job for someone. But here's the other one. That we all know about the winter fuel payment and how terrible it is. But the man who got the Scottish Politician of the Year has got the audacity for leading these people, allegedly, these Scottish Labour MPs who all voted out the winter fuel allowance. While at the same time, this is what Sarwar's saying. Our Labour government will reinstate the winter fuel payment. The dishonesty, Denise, is off the Richter scale.
I'm actually, sorry, a wee bit shocked. No shocked, no loss for words either, I suppose, but I'm kind of taken aback, because if it wasn't so serious, it would be quite funny, because these awards, who are they? Why are we trying to treat politicians like some sort of celebrity? Why do we even treat celebrities that way? I feel to differ as well, but putting them in a pedestal for the mishaps that they do in society. I don't even know what else to comment on that. Where the winter fuel payment's concerned, people are at the detriment surviving right now in society, especially Scotland, and how someone in Pullochry can pay more for their fuel when we get colder weather than someone in London, it certainly doesn't sit right. We should have more investment in energy at home, and knock this national energy out the grid, because it's just another, I'm going to say globalist, that's my favourite word today, globalist ploy, to take our resources and offshore them, as they say.
Well, I think on my awards scheme, and the award for the favourite lawyer of the internet goes to Eva Comrie. So on this, Eva, we're talking about all these things coming together. But another one that John Swinney actually employed and gave a job to, and I want to thank Sue Jameson from Barrhead, wonderful woman, who tweeted this out, so I kept it. And if you look at Scotland stands in solidarity with Ukraine. Does it indeed, John and Olaf, really? As the world marks 1,000 days since Russia's illegal war against Ukraine, First Minister John Swinney reiterates the Scottish Government's unconditional support for Ukraine. Now, that's one, that's fair enough. One of the reasons why I joined, when you and I joined in the party, one of the things we loved about it was neutrality. We didn't get involved in wars or took sides. And now this party, which is moving further and further to the right, is now trumpeting British foreign policy all the time. It's quite shocking.
John Swinney would be complicit in taking us into war, given the proclamations that have been made by the Russians about how they feel towards countries who clearly actively support Ukraine, Britain being one of them. But see this tweeting about foreign wars and support for particular sides in foreign wars. This, like so many other things, is a diversion away from the policies that John Swinney should be concentrating on. Now, you maybe saw the other day that he was launching the campaign that's called 16 Days of Activism. It's against what is presently referred to as gender-based violence. Yeah. Being old-fashioned, I prefer to call it sex-based violence. But the SNP Scottish Government can refer to it as sex-based violence because obviously we know that they don't know what a woman is. And so this week, I'm hoping that viewers will remember to make, if you can, a modest donation to For Women Scotland, whose court action proceeds in the Supreme Court next week. And the arguments for the Scottish Government were published this week. Their argument is that a man with a gender recognition certificate that says he's female should, for all purposes, be treated as if he were female. He becomes female. So there it is in black and white, the official policy, the Scottish Government, the Scottish ministers and the Lord Advocate who signed up their statement released the other day is that a man with a GRC that says he's female is a woman for all purposes. That then means you can no longer define women because the definition of woman will include man. That's the government we've elected. And you'll remember that politicians from all other parties, barring ALBA and the ISP, supported that position. There were some rebels within the SNP, but in the main, that's an SNP position which continues to this day because they speak with forked tongue on this and on every other matter. They pronounce for expediency or for what their British handlers want them to say.
It's quite frightening, Lloyd, with the Storm Shadow missiles getting the okay, Biden giving the okay, we're firing missiles in, and we're a target. And Mr. Swinney, I don't know if you heard this.
I'm concerned about the events that have taken their course in Ukraine, but I stand absolutely, steadfastly behind the support to Ukraine and the equipping of Ukraine to defend itself, because Ukraine is at the mercy of an illegal Russian invasion. And the way to solve this problem is for President Putin to withdraw from Ukraine. That is the simplest way to resolve this issue, because he shouldn't be there and his forces shouldn't be there. Now, I don't welcome conflict. I don't welcome armed conflict. But where a country has its territorial integrity invaded by a foreign power, that has to be repelled. And I support the steps being taken by the United States government, and I hope it is effective in getting President Putin to do what he should do, which is to withdraw from Ukraine and allow Ukraine to take its own course.
Well, unbelievable. The other thing, what I should have added right after that, Mr. Swinney says, except for viewers in Palestine, because I'm saying nothing about that, because that would upset the British and the Americans, and I don't upset the British. He should be saying nothing. We've had this discussion before, Lloyd. He needs to keep his nose out of these things.
Yes, absolutely. You know, Winnie's famous phrase, "Stop the world, we want to get on." Well, you know, we need friends in other places in the future. And if you make statements and make clear that what you're going to do or what Scotland will be on your watch, if it were independent, is effectively a mini-me Britain, then will those 65 countries that left the British Empire suddenly come to our aid in the United Nations? I think not. Mr. Swinney really, I mean, he takes party loyalty to extraordinary lengths of idiocy, in actual fact. This is John supporting what Nicola started. Remember, Scotland stands with Ukraine. She stood at First Minister's questions and said it, and then deliberately sent money, our money, out of a devolved budget. She sent money to a European country where BMWs, Rolls Royces, Ferraris and such like are to be seen in the streets all the time. So of course they were in need of Scotland's money when 1 in 5 of our people are in poverty. For John Swinney to even suggest that he has an opinion worthy of listening to on this issue is a disgrace in itself. But I mean, I couldn't help think to myself, here, John, you know very well, the Russians will not roll over. So standing and saying that you will stand with Ukraine to the bitter end, well, that bitter end could well be a missile landing on Faslane and destroying effectively the west coast of Scotland. Now, we all know, the Russians know that Faslane is there. We all know that John knows it's there, but he doesn't like to think about it. But effectively, John repainted the bullseye on the target that is Faslane by that statement. Because for the world, you know, we talk about our opinions of other world leaders. Now, we don't know them personally. We see them on television. We hear their pronouncements. We make judgments. People do that about us. And unfortunately, the world is seeing us through the eyes of John Swinney at the moment. And that in itself is worrying, if not deeply frightening. We have to understand that when he makes these statements, the rest of the world believes that he's speaking on our behalf. And no one, no Scottish politician who does not have a direct telephone to their ambassador at the United Nations, no Scottish politician, until they have that facility, should say anything about international matters except in terms of earthquake and disaster. Correct,
absolutely. Phil, we've noticed it over the years. We had Drew Henry and David Linden dressing up and playing at British soldiers. We had Dave Dugan and Alan Smith and Stuart MacDonald going to Kiev and sitting behind a Union Jack, a butcher's apron, and spewing out British foreign policy. We've got Sturgeon sending money to the fascists in Kiev. We've got John Swinney saying, we will stand with the fascists of Kiev till the last. They're becoming more British with every passing bloody day.
It's an absolute disgrace, and it's Swinney's the good little establishment supporting boy that he is. People need to remember that Ukraine was and still is the most corrupt country in Europe, with Nazi ties going right back through the Banderas movement and the Nazis of the Second World War, where 100,000 Ukrainians volunteered to man the death camps. Don't forget this, and understand the Maidan Revolution, what happened in the lead up from 2014 and before that, and right up to 2022 with NATO expansionism and the 14,000 Russians murdered, that prompted the Russians to carry out this special military operation to protect its people in the country that is called Ukraine. But don't forget, the Donbass, Crimea and Odessa are Russian-speaking cities. This is a government, Ukraine, Zelensky's government, banned the Russian language, organised a military training camp that was training the whole of, we're talking about, I can't remember, it was a battalion or 4 battalions a month. It was massive amount of military training that the Ukrainian forces and reserve forces, up to 500,000 men, were trained in NATO-style warfare, equipped with NATO equipment, and sent to the front line, and had 60,000 lined up in the Donbass, ready to invade, and the Russians said, enough is enough. We've asked the United Nations, we've asked the EU, they've murdered 14,000 Russians, and now you are ignoring us. We've tried international law. We've tried to complain. We've made a big issue about this. You're ignoring us and you're allowing this slaughter to continue. We're not allowing our people to be slaughtered. We're going to carry out a special military operation. And remember this, 160,000, I can't remember, was it 20 million, 30 million, the population of Ukraine? This is not an army of occupation, 160,000. This was designed to protect the people in the Donbass. And we are not being told the truth. The people in the West are not being told the truth about this proxy war. We have to go to the alternative sources of the news, and that is the Grey Zone, that is the Duran, it's Mearsheimer, it's Colonel Douglas MacGregor, it's Scott Ritter. There's no excuse, folks.
Through a Scottish prism as well.
And through a Scottish prism. And that's the reality. And, you know, I'm trying not to be, I'm not telling anybody to do anything. I'm just suggesting that if you say that you don't believe the papers and you don't believe the news, then why do you keep spouting these headlines as if they're facts? Do your homework. That's all I'm saying, because that's what we try to do. And by God, we're far from perfect.
Speak for yourself.
Oh, wait a minute. Just while we're at it, I would put myself forward for Grand Vizier of Underwater Basket Weaving if we're giving out prizes. Rock and roll.
I forgot to give the weatherman of the world and internet goes, of course, to Mr. Quinnen. And the greatest campaigner ever lived in Ayrshire goes to Denise Sommerville.
Oh, thank you very much.
See, Glasgow Herald, I can do the same. Hey! I actually think my awards are a bit better than the ones you handed out. But anyway, Denise, if you were listening to that, if you didn't know that John Swinney was the leader of the independence movement, a warrior who wanted to divorce himself from the British Union, you would think you were just listening to some British politician. He's
certainly trying to make some sort of statement for himself, I would say, more than anything else. We've really nothing, we've not got defence. Defence hasn't had the full power, so why is he even commenting it in the first place? And again, I would like to ask John Sweeney, why is he being so silly? If I'm allowed to ask that question on here. Again, I live on the West Coast. I'm going to get nuclear bomb before he is up there in Edinburgh, so please watch what he's saying on the mainstream media, because folk will just believe that he's speaking on behalf of Scotland, and he certainly isn't speaking on behalf of me, supporting any kind of war in any type of thing, remaining impartial. And that's, I'll stop there now.
But this is the absolute fact, Eva, that the UK under Starmer has decided that they want to, they've allowed Ukraine to fire in long-range missiles into Russia, which was a red line for Russia. Now, just so in case any of our viewers don't realise, these missiles they're firing in, Ukraine is not capable of firing them in. Mm-hmm. The Storm Shadow missile of the UK is fired by British soldiers, our satellites, our navigation system, the same with the American ones and the French ones, the Scalp missiles. So Russia said, it's a red line. You do that to us, we'll fire back. Now, they fired a warning shot, Eva, which was the first ever, ladies and gentlemen, intercontinental ballistic missile was fired into Ukraine. It was not with nuclear warheads, fortunately. It took out a military-industrial complex in the Donbass, or at least in Ukraine. Will the West take the hint? Because that's what this was. This was a big shot across the bows, literally.
I think the problem for the people of the United Kingdom is that our leaders at Westminster are not honest. And so when it was announced and confirmed that Storm Shadow missiles had been sent, the British government refused to confirm what you've just said, which was that they had to be managed and launched and targeted, etc., by British personnel. That could not be done by Ukrainian personnel. Anybody with any knowledge of these missiles and how the defence systems operate knows this. So the UK government didn't have to confirm what was already known, but they've tried to step away from it and step aside and pretend that it was a Ukrainian decision and that all that Britain does is provide funding and weaponry, when that's really not the case at all. It's known that manpower is being provided, just as it's known that Prestwick Airport has been used for American journeys as a stop and over place, or a refueling place, or as a stop on the way over to the Middle East or to Ukraine. So I think that what needs to happen is that we need a brave politician at Prime Minister's questions in Westminster to ask the question outright and say to the Prime Minister, challenge him, challenge foreign and defence secretaries as often as possible to confirm exactly what it is that British personnel have been doing so far in relation to these wars, because it was the case in the past that if Britain was going to war, which effectively this is what this escapade has been, if Britain was to go to war, it was the subject of a parliamentary vote when people were able to lobby their representatives and tell them if they were for or against it, We know what happened with the Iraq war. We know how illegal that was. We know the people marched against it. So this time, this war is being done literally by stealth, in the hope that the people in the main are daft enough to believe that the Ukrainians are taking Russia on all by themselves.
Yeah, the fact is that Swinney's talking there on being totally British in it, and we know that we're the bad guys, not the good guys in this one. But here's what's the worry for me, Lloyd. I don't know how you feel it. I don't know if you saw the Chief of the Joint Staffs. Now, remember, I want to just say, I'll play the video, then I'll say something.
He was asked to fight tonight.
Yes.
He would fight tonight. And I don't think anybody in this room should be under any illusion that if the Russians invaded Eastern Europe tonight, then we would meet them in that fight. That would be the first point I'd make.
Thank you, General. Yeah, no, I'm absolutely certain.
They're all joining in. I want to just make one point. The Russians have 1.5 million people in uniform, Lloyd. They have 2 million reservists. They are the largest nuclear power in the world, larger than the Americans. We've got 136 across all our services. This clown says we'll go and meet them in the middle of Europe. I mean, it's not just delusional. It's suicidal, and it's as scary as you know what.
Yes, it is. But, you know, the military are now, the British military are now completely infected with the same disease as the politicians. They all think they're minor celebrities. You know, you get documentaries made about you when you've been a senior general in the British Army. Now, let's just be real about this for a minute or two. The British Army at the moment has 221 frontline main battle tanks, of which 60 are inoperable at the moment. So the British are going to confront the massed ranks of the Russian army and the Russian tank forces somewhere in Eastern Europe with less than 150 tanks exactly. This is the real story here. There are a whole bunch of people who are both politicians and military people in this country and civil servants who think they're living in 1938 and that there's an empire out there and that Britain somehow is important in the world. And they have to keep telling us that Britain's important. It's not. It's a piddly wee island north of mainland Europe. The current British forces, with the exception of their nuclear weapons, does not have the ability to defend the Isle of Wight, never mind the whole of the island of Great Britain. Remember, this is the same army, and that guy McGowan served in Northern Ireland, where the British Army lost after 30 years of guerrilla warfare. Now, if the people of this country want to continue living in this Zulu, Rorke's Drift past, where we all have this idea of the glory that was Britain and the glory of British military power, well, let me point something out to you. What the Russians did by the destruction of the drone facility with the ICBM that they used in the Ukraine the other day, they could do exactly the same thing for exactly the same reasons to a place called Beef in Ayrshire, where the Storm Shadow missiles are made. Listen to what Putin said. We will take action against military targets. The Storm Shadow factory in Beef, Mr. Swinney, is a military target.
Yeah, and it would be legal, Phil. It would be within international law for the Russians to do this. And I doubt very much if their special relationship with the Americans would be invoked, because the Americans would be saying, oh, no, we don't want any weapons hitting us.
No, and what we need to remember, this is what the Russians were firing this first ICBM into Dnipro. In the war. Was it a warning? It was basically the same as when I think it was a Kinshal they used to take out that NATO training base. They told the West, watch out, we're going to take out one of these targets and there's nothing you can do about it. And the reality is Russia can strike anywhere in the West and there is nothing anyone can do about it. And what we've done here is effectively declare war, because when you fire these weapons, they cannot be fired, as we've said many times, without the hands of American and British servicemen and women on them. The launch codes, the targeting, the satellite navigation, all of this And Putin, they said this at the time, and they said it at the Security Council meeting. Do not do this. In mid-September, when Starmer went over his wee red case, this is what he and Biden were talking about, and they were forced back off. Now Biden, now you see, I saw a clip of Biden sitting in church or someplace like that. He looks like a little old lost man that nobody visits anymore in the old folks' home. This is not the guy that's going to press the button. This guy's just doing what he's told. These people put a piece of paper in front of him, he signs it, and this is the military-industrial complex pushing for more money, more profit, and we're perilously close to nuclear war, and people and folk need to wake up. The strategy for taking out, well, all the nukes for Britain there are within 35 miles of Glasgow. It's not just the west; it's the whole of the central belt that's taken out, because the strength of the nuclear weapons used these days, it's 2 warheads minimum per target. The whole of Scotland's gone. Depends which way the wind blows. And bear in mind they're in Scotland because to put them in Portsmouth would maybe put a risk to too many people in England. We don't count. We need to have the gumption to stand up and send it. Listen, do you know what? When we get back in charge, there's people like us in charge of Scotland. I'll send them back airmail if they want. They can have them any way they want. But no, well, let's be sensible about it. You'll be told, and we will be making Scotland nuclear free because we are the target. And John Swinney has done this, painted a massive target. And you know, this is disgusting. This is the long-range missiles have got American hands on them and British hands. We were warned about it. These people are taking us, not in my name. And this clown's talking about marching in and we're going to take on these generals that we've got. The Americans are in the same problem. They're promoted because they're political. That's the problem. They're promoted because they'll do and say what they're told. You speak to somebody like Colonel Douglas MacGregor or Scott Ritter, they'll tell you what's going on in the American military and the British military. I've got friends here I won't name, who some are still in the military, who lament the generals that we had, the Montgomerys of this world, no more the Germans, no more the Rommels. You know, these people, I mean, it's a joke. Britain's a joke. Germans are a joke. The Italians, the Dutch, the French, yes, we've got elite forces, but compared to Russia, and bear in mind China will support them, and bear in mind that the BRICS in Kazan announced military unification across BRICS. They've got strategies for similar to NATO, and they are bigger and better. The Russians have the strongest army and probably the best in the world. Battle hardened and honed. The deadwood has been cut out. The leadership has been the mistakes that they made. They learned from them and they improved. You're an idiot. We're foolish. We do not want to go there. And this guy's a clown. We should shut him up.
Yeah. How does it feel to be an Ayrshire lass knowing that Beath could be a major target and it would be a legal target, Denise?
It's always been a scary thought, never mind the war actually playing out in front of your eyes, Roddy, to be honest with you, because I've always known they've been there. It's really, really walking in eggshells time, isn't it? And the world is getting pushed to a brink for an agenda that not everyone can see in the world. As Phil alluded to, people need to start waking up to actually what's going on, do a bit of research into where things are coming from and what started what, the history of it all as well. Just open your eyes, and it's actually quite Orwellian. The George Orwell novel, it really is. It's insane, and scary times to be living in.
Yeah, and it's a worry. My advice to anyone watching this has got children or grandchildren. If the call-up comes, send them to the Republic of Ireland or somewhere. Get them out. Don't let them go and fight for the Anglo spivs. That would be my advice. If that makes me a traitor in some people's eyes, big deal. Who cares? But this week as well, Eva, you know, while Spinny Swinney is always happy to trumpet British foreign policy, it's very seldom the EU come out with this after the issue of the warrants from the ICC. This is Borrell, the foreign secretary spokesman, if you like, of the EU.
Decision of the court has to be respected and implemented. So I take note of the decision of the International Criminal Court to issue arrest warrants from Prime Minister Netanyahu, the former Minister of Defense, Mr. Gallant, and the Hamas leaders, Dave. This decision is a binding decision, and all states parties of the court, which include all members of the European Union, are binding to implement this court decision.
There you go. Now, you're our legal eagle, Eva. A binding decision, and all members are signed up to their own statute of the ICC. But the British, e.g. our Lammy and Stammer, who said live on LBC it was okay for the Israelis to starve and to stop water and electricity, which is a war crime. He's admitted it openly. He's been silent about this judgment. He's meant to be a human rights lawyer. Lammy's been silent. John Swinney didn't rush out to tell us how sincere he is about Palestine and looking after the people there. But this could be, is it a game changer, or will nothing happen?
Well, Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, was on the telly, I think it was this morning, and she was asked, and she said she shouldn't be commenting because it was a live case, which is just utter guff, deliberate avoidance. It's a legitimate warrant issued by a legitimate organisation which is recognised as operating in a legitimate and legal fashion. So our Prime Minister, all of his cabinet, our First Minister, should all be pressed on a yes or no if any of these men arrive in the UK in English, Scottish, Northern Irish or Welsh soil. Will they be arrested? Will the warrant be implemented? There is one answer and one answer only which is acceptable, and it's not silence and it's not evasion. It's a simple, straightforward yes. Every constituent country in the United Kingdom respects the legality of the warrant and it will be implemented. No ifs, no buts.
No, here. The other thing that came out this week in news, Lloyd, is that the Royal Air Force has flown 636 surveillance flights for Israel, in effect assisting in a genocide. Now, should the British government not be very careful that they're not next in front of the ICC?
No, I don't think there's any question, and there's certainly, as Craig Murray's alluded to a number of times, there's memos flying from the Foreign Office to the Home Office to the Department of Defence on a constant basis, reminding them of what they can and what they should or shouldn't say in public. But just to go back slightly, Roddy, about the international warrant, the fact that Phil's in Brussels is really interesting, because after the invasion of Jenin in 2003, the Flanders government, that's the devolved government for the Flemish within Belgium, issued its own arrest warrant for a number of Israeli military people who they knew were coming to have a meeting with NATO in Brussels. And this caused absolute panic. But what it did do is it made clear that a devolved parliament with its own legal powers has the right, irrespective of it being part of a bigger nation state, has the right to apply an international warrant on its own behalf, which is why you will find no Israeli military personnel have visited Belgium in the past 20 years, because they would be arrested. It caused a major problem. In actual fact, it caused the collapse of the Belgian government, because there's the Parliament of Wallonia, there's the Parliament of Flanders. They continued, but the Belgian government collapsed because the Belgian government tried to move a piece of legislation to take the power to apply the international warrant away from the Flanders government. That leads me to what my real point is this. This is not a political issue. This is a legal issue. It has nothing to do with John Swinney. It has nothing to do with any cabinet member of the Scottish government. This is to do with the Lord Advocate. The only person who should be making a decision, or the head of the Crown Prosecution Service, are the only people who should be making decisions about whether their warrant applies. If it's any other person, then it becomes political, the very thing we want this to be removed from. My question would be, why is it that the so-called pro-Palestinian members of the Scottish Parliament, and both the Greens and the Alba member, have made no statements about this whatsoever? Where is the urgency of the supporters of the Palestinian people to call directly on the Lord Advocate to ask whether or not this warrant would be applied. And more importantly, in a broader sense, these people need to start asking the Lord Advocate, not the politicians, the legal people, whether or not all Scottish residents who have served in the Israeli occupation forces will be investigated upon their return to Scotland for to seek out whether or not they committed war crimes. We can't have this both ways. What Stammer says and what Lammy says and what Yvette Cooper says is good for the BBC, but in reality, this is a legal matter. It's not an issue for particularly in Scotland. It's not an issue for John Swinney. This is an issue for the Lord Advocate.
Yeah, but in England, we're talking about Yvette Cooper. Shouldn't the Home Secretary have said, yes, we will apply the law? I mean, if they're not going to recognise and accept the law, how do they expect the rest of us to accept the law, Lloyd?
Well, yes, she should say that, but the danger here is that you begin to cloud over, the lines of demarcation, and certainly in terms of legality. One of the things that the last resort we have against bad politicians is to resort to the courts and to legality. If we start giving politicians legal powers that they frankly don't have, it's a dangerous world. Even the thinking of, but the Prime Minister should step in. No, the Prime Minister shouldn't step in. He's a politician. This is a legal matter. The legal eagles deal with this, not the politicians. You can't have the application of law based on the whim of a politician. The law is the law. It's there. It exists. Apply it.
On that, Phil, but I hear what Lloyd's saying, but we had there Joseph Borrell, who's the European foreign spokesman. He was reminding everybody that these warrants must be honoured. I disagree with it on this one. I think that they have to speak up and say, if they come here, they were all quick to say if Putin lands, they're going to arrest them. So why aren't they saying it about these two?
Yeah, they should.
And I like the point about, anyone who's fought for the IDF should be investigated for war crimes.
Well, it comes down to this simple principle. I think it was John Stuart Mill stated words initially to the effect in Old English, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And we, the Scottish people, we are not warmongers. And some couple of other things Lloyd picked up on. Plaudits to the Flemish devolved government and to Craig Murray for what he's doing. Follow him online, folks. Support him. He is courageous. He's doing the right thing. But I think the ICC and the ICJ, this is an interesting one. So the International Criminal Court versus the International Court of Justice. The ICJ, International Court of Justice, is the principal judicial organ of the UN, right? It took over from us based on the statute of the Permanent Court of International Justice. Hague, it was established in the League of Nations in 1920, and its role is to settle, in accordance with international law, legal disputes submitted by states. The ICC, who issued these, is very different from the ICJ, although it's easily enough to confuse because they're both headquartered in The Hague in the Netherlands. But the ICC was set up by the Rome Statute of 1998 and only began operation in 2002, and its purpose is specifically to judge individuals accused of committing serious crimes, namely genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, crimes of aggression and offences, all this type. But ostensibly, this is the problem. It was set up to prosecute African dictators, not the West and its allies. And while all UN member states are ipso facto parties to the statute of the ICC is not an organ of the UN, nor is it universally recognised. Nevertheless, the UN Security Council is one of the authorities that can trigger a trial, the others being a state or party to the actual prosecution. The second part of your question, Roddy, will it be affected? The short answer is no, it won't. The ICC issues warrants. The ICC is International Criminal Court. The problem is this, that the US and Israel not only are not signatories to it, but don't recognise it. And so if we try and enforce anything, the US will fight you. The ICC tried to prosecute a US Marine for war crimes, and the US government told them no and threatened them. We don't recognise your jurisdictions here, and we will not comply. That's why it's going to have no effect.
It goes back to full circle here, Denise, when we're talking about people are apathetic at the moment and they're discoloured. And it's not just with Scottish independence. It's when they see on their own social media and on the internet, they see a genocide being committed and they hear the politicians saying, well, there's no genocide, it's not happening. They hear American politicians saying, yeah, it's the international court and we're happy for them to try and arrest Putin, but we're not wanting them to arrest our friends. No, it's not right. Is it any wonder that people get disgruntled and get fed up with the whole thing that's going on just now throughout the world?
All I can say is thank goodness for alternative media, because if it wasn't for alternative media, then we wouldn't have another source of gaining this information. We'd just be fed the same old lies, the same old rhetoric, and we'd be believing it. However, when mass media or mainstream media, as we'll call it just now, are still very dominant in the world, and they are saying what they're saying to people, a lot of people are still under the illusion that, yeah, we're all good, we're fine, nothing's going to happen here, and it's still over the other side, touching our doorstep. However, it's getting closer, and again, just I don't know what the politicians need to step up and get a ceasefire and peace in the world. In 2024, who would have thought that we would be feared by war or nuclear warheads at that, destruction, World War III, which will not be a good outcome for any country in this world. Never mind Britain or Scotland, because we've nothing here. Broke down our society so much. We're industries, we're people, we're so individual, and to come together to try and solve this at the moment while everybody's surviving, like we alluded to earlier, is such a impossible task. However, hopefully watch alternative media and are able to see that there is other ways of looking at things. It's not always black and white, and it's not all the politicians that know the answers. It's actually honest with you.
Yeah, that's exactly why they want to close down Twitter and they want to close down social media, because we can catch them out. The clock's beating us, but there's something I want to play another video and I want to comment on it, because recently Xi Jinping told the incoming Trump there was 4 things that they weren't willing to hear, and that was getting lectured. The first one was lectured by the West on human rights, when their human rights records were so appalling, and they weren't going to be talked down to or treated inferior. They wanted to be treated as an equal, and they wanted it to be diplomatic. So Starmer, not happy with wanting to start World War III in Ukraine, with backing a genocide and telling people to starve, he was at the G20 this week, and this was him talking to Xi Jinping, probably the most powerful man in the world, from the richest country in the world, and this is how he spoke to him. I'm
very pleased that my Foreign Secretary and Foreign Minister Wang met recently and discussed respective concerns, including human rights and parliamentary sanctions, Taiwan, South China Sea, and our shared interest in Hong Kong. We are concerned by reports of Jimmy Lai's deterioration health in prison. You raised the Chinese embassy building in London when we spoke on the telephone. And we have since taken action by calling in that application. Now we have to follow the legal process and timeline.
British arrogance in its absolute extreme, talking down to the Chinese, the pomposity, the arrogance. This man has got to be the most ridiculous Prime Minister we've ever had. Not content with starting World War III, he wants to fall out with the biggest trading partner in the world. I despair. I really do. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time and everything. The clock is beating us. Until we see you again, you and yours, take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.